This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress in the sector. With your host, Professor Petra Wend, Professor Emerita and former Principal and Vice-Chancellor at Queen Margaret University, Chair of the University Council of the University of Hamburg, and now Studiosity Academic Advisory Board member. Welcome.
Today I'm speaking to Professor Rebecca Bunting, Vice-Chancellor and Chief Executive at the University of Bedfordshire and fellow Academic Advisory Board member. Rebecca, thank you for being here and speaking to me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think you brought an object with you.
I have indeed.
What did you bring?
Well, I have brought a very flimsy, yellowing piece of paper, which is a telegram. And now I guess many people listening to this may not even know what a telegram is, but it was like a kind of text in the old days, in a way, a quick way of getting a message to somebody that you paid for by the word. So it was always written in very strange language, and it was delivered to your house or your business. And I found this when I was going through my late mother's things. I found a scrapbook, kind of albumy scrapbook thing that she'd put together, which was, well, I won't say what it was about until I've told you what this telegram is. And this is the telegram, just in case we use it visually. It says, offered admission, Girton. And this was my offer of a place to study English at Girton College, Cambridge. I was the first person in my family to go to university. This was the moment when everything changed, and my mother had kept it in this scrapbook, and now I've kept it for probably a number of reasons, largely, because keeping something that she treasured, that I can treasure, in a sense. The fact that she treasured it matters more than anything to me. But it's special because it kind of, it was waiting for me when I came home from school, and my parents obviously knew that this was special because you don't get telegrams very often, and it wouldn't have been bad news, they wouldn't have done that. It would have been a letter. So there it was. And this was the beginning of the change in my life and their lives and my brothers and sisters' lives. And I can still remember the excitement of it. It was a bit like a kind of, a movie where people open something and light comes out of it, and it was all kind of flashing lights and everything. Because the opportunities that this offered for my future life, I kind of, in a strange sense, had a grasp of that. I didn't know what they were, but I just knew that this was it, and it was this little moment. And I can remember my parents coming and hugging each other and having me in the middle of this hug, because this was it. And in a way that's a bit sad also, because they knew I was going, and that hadn't happened in their lives before. They hadn't seen people in the family go off to university for however short a term it was, I have to say, at Cambridge. About 8 weeks. But anyway, they hadn't done that before. So it was at that moment of change and that moment of opportunity, which I've kind of held on to in my heart and always known about, but I hadn't realized there was something that encapsulated it, that my mother had treasured.
Did you, that's fantastic. Did you, when you went to school, were you always so ambitious? Did you want to go to Cambridge or Oxford?
Well, I knew I wanted to I went to a grammar school, and I knew I wanted, it was a small local grammar school. You had to pass the 11 plus to go into it. It wasn't a paying school. And, I did well at school. I was, so I kind of knew I would go to university. And I did, I genuinely didn't start out going, oh, I'm going to go to Oxford and Cambridge. That wasn't where it started. it started by looking at the kinds of courses I could do and the subjects I could study. But then I thought, well, I could go to Oxford or Cambridge, and maybe I should look at that. And I looked at the syllabuses, and I didn't like the Oxford syllabus. There was far too much Old English in it. And I was quite happy to start with Middle English, which is for the uninitiated a bit later. And so I was, and I wanted to do much more modern literature, which Oxford didn't offer, because they stopped in 1945, I think, when, the world in Oxford seemed to have come to an end. So yes, but I knew I was ambitious, and I knew that I wanted to do this, and it became the journey that we were on in the family, that Rebecca was going to be going to university, and it happened to be Cambridge. And I didn't apply to Oxford. I applied to, this is a very long time ago, Petra, you've got to dig back in your memory for it.
Yes.
But it came good.
And yeah, fantastic. Did you have a special teacher who helped you or who inspired you?
I did. I had some very good teachers. I had some pretty poor teachers as well at school, I recall. But in order to get into Cambridge, you had to do an entrance exam. So if you were in a private school, you were trained towards the entrance exam. I didn't have any of that, but there was a really lovely English teacher who said that he would, help me. So for a term before the exam was in December, he you wouldn't be allowed to do this these days, but after school we would meet for an hour, and in a broom cupboard, literally, and we would talk about books, and he would say, right, next week read Howard's End, or let's talk about John Donne next week, read these poems, and I would just love that. First of all, the attention of it, to be able to talk to somebody about what you've read and what you're thinking was fantastic. But it opened my thinking to a whole range of things I wouldn't have come across just doing an A-level syllabus, because obviously you're stuck on what you're supposed to do when you're doing a syllabus, and you don't really often divert from it. But I was diverting like nobody's business, and starting to understand how it all fitted together. It never occurs to you when you're just reading the odd novel that novelists at various periods knew each other or lived near each other, and took tea together and went out together. And all these things started to fit in together because I was given a wider kind of brief in a way. And so I think I just I just loved that. And I knew that if that's what I was going to get when I went to university, bring it on. I wanted more of that. So yes, in a sense, but the school wasn't, no one really had, I don't think anyone had been to Cambridge before from the school. And the exam papers arrived, and I remember the head teacher coming to me and saying, what are we supposed to do with these? And I said, I think you're supposed to invigilate me.
Incredible. What a story. And then you got to Cambridge as the first, Cambridge, which is Cambridge, but also the first in your family to go to university. Was that difficult?
It was certainly different. I don't know if it was difficult. I mean, I think transitions for anybody from home to university are probably quite interesting in retrospect, aren't they? But I did find that most of the young women, the girls, as we called ourselves, that I was studying with, there were 14 of us in my year group at Girton, had been to private schools. They lived really different lives from me. Their parents sent them hampers at the weekend, my neighbour put on her door, gone to point, right?
What does that mean?
Well, you see, now that I didn't know either, I had to look it up. point to point is horse jumping, right? And she'd gone to this horse jumping thing, which is a point to point. She'd gone to the point to point. You know, there were all sorts of things like this that were happening that were culturally completely outside my realm of experience. And, you know, a confidence in others that you do find in, you know, public school educated young people. That's part of what it is, isn't it? Growing that confidence. And that was certainly there. And so, you know, it was different. And, you know, all their brothers and sisters had been, you know, come up through very traditional routes and so on. And you know, it was different. But the commonality was we'd all done A level, and I got an A. You know, and I'm not. This is ridiculous telling you I got an A at A level in my English literature. But that, you know, I was on a level playing field in that sense. It was just the kind of the social aspects, the cultural aspects. You know, I hadn't ever been to the opera. They were you know, they were talking about going to the opera, and I couldn't afford to go to the opera, let alone, you know, even if I wanted to. And many examples like that, which just showed me that life was so very, very different. I'll tell you another fun. I can just talking about this has reminded me of this. Going to a party and seeing on the buffet table food I'd never seen before, and there was a brie, a whole brie cheese. I had never seen brie cheese in my life. We didn't get it where I lived. But these were sophisticated people who lived lives of a degree of sophistication that, you know, and so it was interesting. It was interesting to do the people watching side of it. I mean, sometimes it was a wee bit upsetting, but you get, you know, you find your way through it, don't you? I can remember a couple of things that I initiated. One of which was there was no bar in the college, and although I didn't drink at that time, I felt there was you know, something missing, because you couldn't bring people back and so on. And every other college had a bar, so I did go and speak to the mistress of the college and said, would it be possible for us to think about how we might do this? And we did it. So I did have the confidence to do that, which is a bit bizarre, really, isn't it? I mean, I hope I didn't get a reputation for myself, but, you know, I think that was important. And I also asked for some money once, which was because I was doing my dissertation, and it was about literature for the radio. I was really interested in how that works. And at the time, there were lots of writers like Harold Pinter and so on who were writing for the radio. They began in writing for radio, in, you know, kind of pre-television days, although I wasn't pre-television myself, but, you know, that's where their writing days had begun. And I got interested in all of this. And there was a conference, an international conference at Durham University, and it cost £30 to go to it. And so I went and asked if it would be possible for me to have any financial support, and they paid for me to go so that would feed into my work on my dissertation. Oh God, I felt so, you know, blessed that they'd helped me in that way. So I did, you know, I did have that kind of sense of initiative myself. But I think, you know, back to your question about was there anything I would change, I think that would have changed now. I think there's probably much stronger interest in making sure that students are okay, settled, understanding, you know, touching base with students, and being you know, more proactive than I think they were in the day.
Yeah. Okay. So after your undergraduate degree, what did you do then?
I went to train to be a teacher.
Ah, yes. What was that like?
Well, I went to study at London University, and um, I was selected for what was called the experimental course. I know, can you imagine doing that these days? Um, and this is hard to believe really, but in the olden days, teacher training was done in universities. You know, you just did almost all your work in a university. It was all theoretical. And then you had a little bit of time where you actually met pupils, you know, and you might do the odd lesson. But that, you know, that was shifting at that time. And the experimental course was an immersive in-school course. You were almost entirely in school. You were supernumerary in school. And I loved that, you know. You still had to do all these essays and things, you know, and read a lot of theory as well. You still had to do all of that, but you were in school kind of from 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock, and parents' evenings and so on, and doing all of it. And I thought that was a really good model, and I really enjoyed it. But I did realise that the students who were not on the immersive course had a much easier time, you know, because they were just swanning around the Institute of Education, you know. But I really enjoyed that, and I was placed in now where was I placed? Near King's Cross, in a further education college. One of my options was, and the other was in Maida Vale, I think, in a very big, quite tough, comprehensive. All the names have changed since then. I'm not being coy about this, that they don't exist anymore. They've merged or whatever. So I was doing secondary and further education together, so that was interesting. And gosh, they were experiences I'd not had myself at school. They were very, very different. And you know, you just had to be really grown up, professional from day one. It was fantastic. I loved it.
You must have still been very young then.
Yes, I was 21. Yes, when
Yes,
I
you
graduated. I
just
know.
imagine being
Yes,
21 and being faced with that situation with these, well, in some cases, young adults.
they were, and some cases much older than me in the FE sector.
Mm.
Um, but I really, you know, I just enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed learning with them, and I had, I think, I think being at Cambridge had given me a kind of an inquisitiveness about things that because you're kind of taught to be questioning, and I had, you know, I could carry that into my teaching, and I wasn't just standing up and delivering content all the time. And you know, I think they rose to that. But I did have some tough students, and actually, when I really started teaching and being paid for it, I had some very tough pupils. I taught my first job was in a comprehensive in Southall, um, where all the students were not white, let's put it that way. I had never taught anybody who wasn't white, and it was really, you know, interesting for me to have that exposure. But a grammar school and a secondary school had merged, and I was the first year in as a new teacher into that merger. So there were 14 sets, graded sets, and I got to teach set 14, you know, and they were the children who had basically at 11 been written off.
Hmm.
Um,
Did that give you a completely new perspective on education?
it did. It absolutely did. Because there were children there, and all the way through the school, really. I mean, the children in the grammar school group were just going to go on and do all sorts. They all had famous parents, and, you know, they were going to go into the theatre or whatever, and definitely to university. the group that had come from the secondary modern merger side had none of those aspirations or expectations, and yet some of them were really very bright, very capable, and it was clear to me that it was a case of getting as much as I could out of them, you know, and helping to somehow change what they thought education could do for them. Because at the point of entry, they didn't really think it could do very much for them at all. I mean, some of them did go on and do, you know, great things. Some of them got into trouble with the law. I saw one of my pupils on, was it called Police 5? There was a television program about the police, and one of my pupils was on it. He'd robbed a museum in London. And I thought, well, at least that's,
At least it was a museum.
Maybe I could take some credit.
Do you feel that, I know it sounds a bit grand asking that, but do you feel, we talked about the role of teachers before, that you had a transformational role in some of these pupils' lives?
Well, in a way, it can feel rather arrogant to think that, can't it? Because lots of things happen in their lives and so on. But I hope so. And I hope that stayed with me. You know, I believe it did, but I think it is in a way for others to attest. But and talking to their parents too, that was really important because they'd written their children off. And so being able to see them on parents' evenings or invite them in, that was, you know, they didn't really want to come in. That was, you know, because their days at school, if you were invited in, you were in serious trouble. But to come in and talk to them about how they could help. And I kept in touch, or rather a few of them kept in touch with me when I moved from that school to another school and even beyond. One pupil went to work at Hampton Court in the textile department. He had gone on to do a degree in textiles in London. I mean, unbelievable, amazing. You know, he had that talent. So you know, it was more than just a stand up and deliver kind of thing for me. I did get interested in their lives, the challenges they were facing, and they would talk to me about them, you know, and they needed that.
Do you think that experience shaped your life as an educator as well? Because yes, you were a first generation university student, but you did go to Cambridge.
Yeah.
And then teaching in a school like that and seeing the lives of these pupils and where they come from and that there are huge opportunities, and that's simply because of their backgrounds. They don't seem to realize what they've got.
Yes.
Did that shape you later on when you went into university?
Definitely, yes. You know, looking past, as it were, looking past the face, you know, finding out and acknowledging that for all students, it's been a hard journey to get where they've got to, but not all of them have struggled in the same kind of way. I've always worked in universities with a strong emphasis on access and widening participation by choice, you know, and, you know, a sense that social mobility of the kind that I experienced, you know, still isn't there for everybody. Those opportunities are not all there, and that universities can play a role in that and can really, you know, change lives. Education changes lives is our mantra, isn't it? And it was true for me, and I carry that with me, kind of stamped on my heart, that it does change lives, and it gives you opportunities to do things that you would never have been able to do without education. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's true of many educators, isn't it? You have something in your own experience and your own political commitment as well, you know, to equality and wanting to kind of do some of that heavy lifting in social mobility, really making things work, really working hard to help people to see what the options are and what they can achieve, being ambitious both for yourself and for other people. I think we all, I can't believe most educators don't carry that with them as you know, as their kind of brand of what they want to do. But it's definitely driven my career. And I'm really, you know, I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of what, you know, what students that have been in the universities I've led and the universities I've worked in, what they've been able to do.
And you've become a vice-chancellor. So how
Right.
did all this come about? Did you always know you wanted to become a vice-chancellor because maybe you had more influence to shape the sector, or was that something that just happened?
I don't think anything like that ever just happens, does it? Like, um, well, I mean, Petra, you know all of this, but I think, well, you know, my mother would have said, or my father would have said, well, you're a bit bossy, you know. And there's always that sense of wanting to be in charge, you know, and I think I've probably got a little bit of that in me anyway. But um, I think the opportunities came about because I was looking for them. I was able to be mobile in taking jobs in different places, which not everybody can do. And, you know, I was able to draw on lots of good experience in kind of thinking about what needed to be done. I got involved in national things as well as regional and inside the university things. So there was a design, I think, behind it, but I didn't, in a sense, know that I would end up being a vice-chancellor. I just knew I wanted to take more responsibility for the course. Then I wanted to take responsibility for the department, and then it was the faculty, and then it was, you know, I was a pro-rector, pro-vice-chancellor, and then I was a deputy vice-chancellor at Portsmouth University with a very wide remit of responsibility, which, you know, the vice-chancellor trusted me to take on. And I'm very grateful to him for that, which really gave me the springboard into being able to apply for the top job.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very classical career, isn't
It
it?
is. It is.
Yes, it's very, very similar to mine. So I assume as well you went for these jobs because you felt you could then make a difference at that level. So you had the ideas, you had the ambitions, but you knew you could only implement them once you achieved the higher level.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that's absolutely right. There are limits to what you can do. But I think I kind of, I mean, I didn't get the first job I went for, you know, by any stretch. And probably that was a good thing because I learned from going through that process. I uh, rethought, you know, what kind of university is best going to suit my talents and so on. Um, I knew it wouldn't be a research intensive university. That was not a possibility, but good teaching quality. I am at heart a teacher, and that's where I wanted to kind of, you know, take what I inherited, and, you know, I've been doing that ever since in a way. I mean, obviously I've been engaged in research, I've written books and stuff, but and papers, but and I see research as a really important, crucial part of what we do in the university sector. But it's not the prime purpose of what we're doing. And having your own university is fantastic, isn't it?
Mm.
It's not yours. It's not yours. I'm wrong to use that expression. But knowing that, you know, you have, with the right senior team with you, and I have got the right senior team, you know, that there's so much you can do. and you can see the benefits of that in so many different ways. So yeah, I love it. It's fantastic.
So you're also very emotionally involved.
Yes, I am. But it's almost a spiritual thing in a way. I don't mean a religious thing. I don't mean that at all. But there's a kind of knowing that you're doing things that make a difference has an uplifting feel to it, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
that's really, I love celebrating success. I love it when good things happen, and when, I love it when I meet students and they talk to me about how fantastic it is that we put 4 microwaves in the canteen. I love the little things as well as the big things about making life at the university for staff and students the best it can be. And haven't achieved that by any means. You never achieve it, but helping people to do the best job they can do and to be the best learner they can be, that really gives me a buzz.
And I assume graduation ceremonies bring this all back. And so once a year, twice a year, I don't know how many you do them. I think this is probably each time that you realize, my goodness, this is what it's about.
You do, absolutely you do. But there are so many of them. Oh my word, we did 18 in the summer that's just gone. It's an industry in a way, isn't it? Large numbers of students and small venues. I'm not complaining in that sense, but yeah, I love graduation ceremonies. I find them year on year, though, I find them physically harder to stand up and either shake hands or nod, because we've stopped shaking just at the moment. I think a lot of universities have continued not to do that. There are many of our students who, for religious reasons, don't want to shake, but also we're just conscious of all sorts of things like COVID. But the physicality of standing for an hour and I find that really, really quite something now, which I didn't used to. You feel your back going with age. But I absolutely love graduation, and I know all my staff do. They, the families there. I have to say, some of our graduations have become a little bit like proms these days. They are formal, but there's a really big degree of informality about them. And the students dress up and their families dress up, and it's absolutely fantastic. When I graduated, you had to wear a black skirt, a white shirt, and you couldn't show your arms and all of that. It's not like that at all. There is whooping and cheering and stamping and everything. And it's just fantastic. It really is. And the relief, that you can sense as well that they got there, and how much it means to the families, because you can see that those families have lived with those students, and actually many of them, I should say, our parents themselves are students. That at my university, that a very large number of students are mature, are in their 30s and 40s. They have their own responsibilities and rents and mortgages and children, and the children come, and the grandparents come, and it's just amazing to be at your
Right.
mum's graduation ceremony. How cool is that?
Yeah, fantastic. But moving from celebrations to the hard reality of leading a university in these times at the moment, how would you summarize the main challenges at the moment?
Gosh, where to start? Well, clearly we have certainly in England, there are different stories elsewhere, but if I just focus on what affects my university, we just have to wait to see what's going to come out in terms of any policy for higher education. But I think everybody who is interested is aware that universities are really in financially straitened times, and You know, managing on fees that haven't changed almost at all in 12 years is not something any business should be asked to deal with. I think life in universities is changing so quickly as well. You know, we went through COVID, and you almost forget about that in a way, don't you? But it's only 3 years ago. Managing to get all your students to graduate as a result of that, and we've only just got the last lot through this last summer, you know, who started their first year was in the COVID. So we've been through all that. We managed that crisis, and I think in the sector we managed it very well, and I know we did in my university. But everything else is changing around us, you know, culture is changing, attitudes about work are changing, attitudes about study are changing. The cost of living has a massive impact on students' lives and staff's lives. Artificial intelligence is on our shoulder, you know, where there is so much happening, and all of this, in a sense, you can a lot of it is very exciting, you know, and certainly the kind of really strong orientation that we have in my university to employability and careers. We have a brand about career-powered education. All of that is really good and exciting, and universities have a wonderful part to play in economic regeneration, in local regeneration, and certainly my university, we want to, you know, play a full role in all of that. But you can't do it on a shoestring. And you know, I do wonder, I mean, when I went to university, it was free. I didn't pay a penny, and I had a grant, a maintenance grant. And you know, I don't know how I would feel now if I were going to university again, a rerun, and I had the prospect of, you know, £9,250 each year, plus. What would that feel like? And no amount of saying, oh, it's, you know, it's not a real debt, or you know, just treat it like national insurance or whatever, you know, whatever. I don't think that's terribly reassuring, really. So times are hard at the moment in the university sector. I think things, you know, we just have to be patient to see where that takes us. But there have been some pretty challenging things happening very recently. International student numbers have pretty much collapsed across the sector. And, you know, we have to kind of build our way out of that, recover from that. It's a tricky time to be in charge.
No, how can universities find their way out of it? I know that Universities UK have just met. It must have been the main topic of discussion as well. Obviously, there's hope with the new government that at least the language has changed, that eventually the financial situation might change as well. But in the meantime, universities have to survive. And is it each university to their own, or are universities actually working together to find their way out of this?
Mergers and partnerships and the kinds of things, and collaborations and those kinds of things, are terribly difficult in our sector, aren't they? Because we are autonomous organisations, and our boards of governors see themselves very strongly in that way. And we do cooperate. We cooperate on research. You know, there are all sorts of ways in which we do, but you know, and we haven't really in the sector seen failure. There've been one or two, I won't name institutions, but one very recently, very small, very specialist, and one private provider, you know, a few years ago, that was more generalist. And so there is, in a sense, sometimes a bit of a false sense of security that it can't happen or it won't happen. And so you know, you plough on in your independent furrow as a university. But I think if there is any financial support going to come from the government? It's going to be something for something, isn't it? It's not going to come with no strings attached, and those strings will be perhaps about more regional planning, about more regional cooperation, because obviously for many universities, the region is the important thing. I know for more research intensive universities, that tends to be more at the research level, which is more international and less locally driven. So it will be horses for courses in that sense, but something will emerge of that kind, because there isn't, there are other calls on the funds, and whether this, that there've been so much negativity about higher education as well in the media, hasn't there, recently? And well, not actually just recently, over the last few years. I didn't go to university and look at me now, I'm a millionaire kind of thing, and it didn't do me any harm not going to university. But the value of a university education does go beyond the monetary values you will get out of it in your life, although they will be greater. And it goes beyond even the health benefits you will have as a graduate, which are undeniable. It is about the kinds of people we want, isn't it? The kinds of ways they see the world, behave, understand each other. It's about a lot more than that kind of rather transactional view of going to university. And I just hope we don't lose any more of that through the way things are.
Do you think the impact report that was commissioned by Universities UK helps to convince both government and skeptical people that universities have a huge impact? I know that report does not talk about the other impacts such as health and so on that you mentioned. It talks about financial impact, but I guess these are figures that people are more easily believe, maybe.
Yes.
Than
Yeah. The economic impact of universities in their localities. I think we've probably all done our own individual reviews of that. Somebody's making a lot of money somewhere from carrying out these reviews. And it's absolutely clear that universities are anchor organizations in their locales. They bring graduates to jobs. They help develop jobs, and to take the university out of that place, if that were the worst case scenario, would be catastrophic for certainly for my university and where we are. It would be absolutely catastrophic, because alongside the Vauxhall, the airport and the football club, we are another main anchor institution in the town. So I think that argument is a strong one. There just is such a pervading view that too many people go to university, and that it should be more elitist, and that we should restrict. Do all these people deserve to go to university? I've heard someone actually said that to me once. I don't speak to them now. But that attitude about, I got through it, and now I'm pulling the drawbridge up for everybody else. They're not allowed in. I find that really quite unacceptable morally.
Yeah.
And it's just that prevailing discourse of, don't do it, it's not worth it, it's too expensive. But the reason it's too expensive is the way that it's, student finance has been, given to us. And so I think a fundamental review, A, is necessary, and B, is undoubtedly on the cards, because it's not just about putting extra money into universities. There's a whole lot more that needs to be thought about, not least of which is the student end of things, and how that affects their lives, and their ability to pay back, because the less you have, the longer you take to pay it, and the more it costs you. So it's a perverse ruling, and we shouldn't really allow those things to happen.
Well, you certainly have my full admiration being a Vice-Chancellor now. You need stamina, you need endurance, you need intelligence, flexibility, intellect, patience, determinations. I don't know, I could think of so many words now. So genuinely, you've got my full admiration, particularly in these difficult times. Going back then perhaps to when you were young, what advice would you give now to your younger self?
Oh gosh, well, I can't say be more ambitious because I was ambitious. I think some of the things I've learned through my life, I didn't really know when I was younger, and I probably, I might have benefited from, the bits of advice that I now give to, people that I mentor, people in the sector that I mentor and so on, about networking and being, open to all sorts of things. Don't close the doors on things. Don't say I haven't got the time, or that's not for me, or think about it. See if you can. See, don't say no unless you've really got to. And keep a good network of good people around you in whatever role you're in whatever field of work you're in, because that's where you get the good feedback, and that's where you get the nurturing that we all need. You can't take all that home to your family. They get fed up hearing about it anyway. And so it's good to have, in some cases, lifelong friendships that and so I think nurture your friendships. I did do that to a sense, but probably could have done that a bit more. So and also because I was moving jobs quite, not spending huge amounts of time at the beginning of my career in one place. I probably, missed out on doing some of that, but I think that's really important. But going for it, not because I think this is probably in common with quite a lot of people, including women, I would say, the old imposter syndrome, oh, I can't do that because, everybody else will have a better opportunity. They'll have got more experience or more knowledge or whatever. And I think that probably affected me a little bit. So that's not to say I wasn't ambitious. I was ambitious, but sometimes thinking, oh, I'm not good enough for that. And that, I don't think that's to do with confidence. It's more to do with something much deeper about how you are seen as a woman in society and what you absorb of that. So I think I would, nurture your friends and your colleagues, and keep those relationships going. Don't suffer from imposter syndrome. If it's possible to do it in that kind of didactic way, do not suffer from it. And I think that those would be a couple of things my younger self. I would have loved to do certain things that I didn't do, and I wished I'd managed to keep up some things, like doing lots of theatre and things like that. I don't mean attending theatre, I mean performing, because I did, a lot of drama at university, and I let that go, and I'm sorry about that. And I'm singing as well. And recently, in the last 10 years, I would say, I have picked up the singing again. And I'm so glad I did, choral singing. But I wish I'd done that sooner. So I suppose my final thing is, don't lose the things that you really love doing, because you think, oh, I'm just so busy all the time, and I'm at work all the time, and I have no time to do any of these things. And you do regret it. So I would have kept up more of that, I think. And I'm now in late life starting to do some more of that again.
Absolutely fascinating, Rebecca. Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to me today. And Yes, as I mentioned before, I admire that you managed to do the job you're doing in these difficult times. And it's so good to hear also where you come from. It's a very similar story to mine.
I think
And
it is, yes.
it is. And so I know exactly what you've been going through. And you're still there fighting. So well done. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petra. It's lovely to talk to you.
You have been listening to Studiosity's podcast, Reimagining Higher Education, candid conversations within higher education, sharing stories of leadership, change, and best practice in teaching and learning. Visit studiosity.com.